stream of consciousness.
Elephants mourn their dead. Last year there was that orca and its baby died, and it was dragging the dead baby around in its mouth for weeks. It was so terrible. The baby was disintegrating. It was not alive, but the mother was dragging the baby around in the water, just completely devastated by the loss. And for a long time, the other whales would follow her around, just watching this horrible sight unfold. They probably knew there wasn't really anything they could do for her. But at some point, they stopped following her, and she was alone, dragging the rotting carcass of her baby around in her mouth. Eventually she stopped. I forget exactly how it ended or what happened to the whale after she gave up on her dead baby. But what a terrible story. And I remember following it just in complete horror of what had happened, because the subtext of this whole thing was that this pod of whales is like a very, very small remnant, and they've survived a lot. They survived the sounds underwater released by commercial and military traffic, the shipping and naval things that make all those terrible loud sounds in the water that confuse the whales so badly. And all those other kind of save the whales things we know about. I'm not sure if orcas are true whales. I think they're more closely related to dolphins, but that just means that they're even smarter than the whales. Really smart creatures, and this one whale, she really lost it. She really lost it, and I think that's fair. There's that movie. I'm going to murder the director's name. Catherine Breillat, I think is her name, or how you would say it. Breillat, if we want to say it in English. And she had that movie. What was this movie? She's made a lot of very famous movies. And she made this movie with Asia Argento as the main character. And it's called The Old Mistress. I think in English they called it The Last Mistress, but it's really The Old Mistress. And in it, this woman, I think she's a prostitute, falls in love with an aristocrat or a nobleman. They fall in love with each other, just passionately, intensely in love. And they move to, this is a period piece. And they move to Morocco or somewhere. It looks great. It's very beautiful. And they live in some, beautiful sun-drenched home in the desert. And she has a baby, and the baby dies instantly. And she refuses to let go of the baby for days, maybe weeks. In this movie, and you see her just holding the rotting corpse, weeping and screaming, while her lover kind of looks on helplessly, essentially. He's there, he's in the house, and he's helpless with what to do. I mean, the death of his baby is already very sad and tragic, but then on top of it, this woman he loves is just in such keen and acute mourning, and it does not end. And that's a very intense and frightening spectacle. This idea of an endless mourning. But maybe all mourning is endless. It's just some mourning is more visible than others. I think that's kind of an interesting thing when you talk to somebody and going through a tragedy, or maybe it's an ongoing tragedy with no end in sight, or maybe the tragedy's past, but it's still a tragedy for them inside themselves. And say, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm fine. There's nothing really to say after that. And it's probably not fair. It's not fair to probe. But then sometimes people are waiting for the right question to be asked just so they have that permission. But then other people just, they don't even want to touch it because what's your alternative? Your alternative is to be that killer whale dragging the corpse of its baby around for weeks, just in utter devastation. I wonder what that whale is up to now, and if she had any other, if she's had, no, it's too soon. I don't think she would have been able to have another baby whale by now, but that's another part of the tragedy that's so sad. I don't think it's easy for killer whales to have babies with all that's going on in the oceans around them. I don't think it's easy for them to even hear each other. And if the way that you find each other is through sound and you can't even hear anymore, and you don't know when there's other whales around who might want to have whale sex with you, how are you supposed to have a whale baby? And never mind one that will live to whale adulthood. And man, those whales, they stay together in their pods, their whale families, for their life, for a whole lifetime. Unless they get kicked out of the pod. I wonder, are they like lions or like puma, other big cats, like, or I don't know if wolves are like this, but like lions, the males eventually get kind of like pushed out. You can really only have one adult male kicking around. I don't know if killer whales are exactly like that, but definitely there's bachelor pods running around. I know there's bachelor pods of belugas, and sometimes they invite narwhals to join them. And that was another cool piece of news from last year. The beluga narwhal hybrid confirmed, living in pods of beluga whales, just kind of pretty happy to be there. It's not a beluga, it's not a narwhal, it's something entirely of its own, and so beautiful, kind of like this dappled creature in and among the belugas, which the belugas also such incredible creatures to behold. They're so gregarious, they're so smiley, truly smiley and curious, like a golden retriever of whales. They're just so happy to see you, and they want to come up close. And there's a rule when you go whale watching in a kayak. If you see a beluga in anywhere, whether it pops up close, which it might, or whether you see it far in the distance, you have to stay, I think it's like 500 meters away. You have to be so far away from a beluga, and you have to start moving away from the beluga as soon as you see it, because if you stop and make eye contact with the beluga will come to you. That's how excited they are to see you. I don't know if they were always like this, or if this is something that they've developed since people stopped eating them. But it's remarkable. What a good feeling to know that there's a creature out there. I saw a beluga once. It was just playing in the wake of a very large ferry, and as I'm looking at it, there's a rainbow. So there was a beluga playing in the surf underneath a rainbow, and you can, I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. To this day, it still makes me so happy. It was just bobbing around in there, and a seal pops up, and then another seal, and they're all bobbing around in sort of a real life Lisa Frank binder. It was amazing. What a wonderful thing, and I will remember that my whole life. Just such a special thing, and you can't plan on that. It just happened. It really just happened. And those are the good things in life. You can't plan them. They just happen. Just like wild strawberries growing in a field. Suddenly you stumble upon them, and there they are. Unless you happen to have arrived somewhere and somebody's like, oh, over there is a delicious field of wild strawberries. Just try to not go. Just be aware of the bears when you go, because bears also like wild strawberries. And you're like, okay, and is this a good time to go? Will there be bears there when we go to eat the wild strawberries? And you and your friend look at each other, and all you want are those wild strawberries. And you walk, and you walk over the bridge, this old wooden bridge. It was in the middle of nowhere. It's incredible. It's a wooden suspension bridge, and it's the biggest one in the entire world. And it was built during the war by teams of people brought here who maybe never returned. And there's a little ferry that goes across it. But by ferry, I mean kind of like a raft with a rope. And you pull the rope to pull yourself across from one side to the other. And so instead of taking the ferry, you just take the bridge. There it is. And on the other side is this a strawberry field, a field full of wild strawberries. And they're tiny and they're sweet and they're delicious. And you're rolling around in the strawberry field like a bear. And the sun is shining on you. It's shining on your face and your belly. And you're just putting these teeny tiny strawberries in your mouth. You're never going to get full eating these teeny tiny strawberries. They're too small, but they're sweet and delicious. And you can keep eating them forever. They're so lovely. They don't exist to fill you up. They just exist for pleasure. They exist to give you a sweet feeling, something in your memory, and something to make you come back again and again. Just delicious and lovely wild strawberries growing in a field. That's all we need in life. This is all we need in life. Hopefully we can have it. Beautiful places and clean air and sunshine and food that's tasty that you can just find around you. I'm not advocating some kind of civilizational collapse where there are no more computers or cardiac surgery, but I do think it's possible to live in a way that maybe it's more accessible for more people to have a strawberry field to roll around in and eat food. It's possible. I know there's a lot of limitations that we also need to consider, but the whales that have been so negatively impacted over the past, many decades by the increasing noise pollution inside our oceans. Since this pandemic started, there's been a major drop-off in the shipping traffic. And this has come with a concomitant, is that how you say it? Reduction in noise. And you can listen to this on the internet. It's remarkable. There's the sounds of whales talking to each other with all this background noise. And there's the sounds of whales talking to each other now without any background noise. And maybe that whale that lost her baby will have a new baby this year, and it will survive. It will grow up into a bigger whale. Killer whales are cool. I think there are reasons people don't like them, and there's a reason they're called killer whales, but they're also so badass, and they look so great, and I don't know. I'm one of those people who also thinks that, like, if things are healthy enough for, these apex predators to survive, then we're probably in a good space too. You can ask a conservation biologist about that, and they will probably confirm that sentiment. But there's a lot of things to mourn right now, and in my comfy couch, pulling out old memories of beautiful places and smells and tastes and people. It's easy to feel like nothing is seriously wrong, but it's also good to remember that we can think about making things good. That's right. That's a very vague statement. All these statements are very vague. And that's because I'm really just stuck in my own mind, thinking of just beautiful things, wonderful things that make me feel happy. And that is a really good thing to do when you don't want to think about things that are sad. It really works best when you really are immersed in those happy feelings. I don't think if you have a lot of sad feelings and you're forcing yourself to think happy thoughts, that's obvious. Just obviously not going to work. I think we can do a science experiment that will replicate other science experiments that prove that that just doesn't work. That's probably a good sign of being over something. I think over something is a terrible way to put being at the end of a period of mourning. But it is also an important thing to do, to be at the end of a period of mourning. And how long should a person mourn? We're not whales or elephants. And mourning itself, it takes so many different phases and stages. I had a relative, and he was so torn up about the death of his parents, even many years later, so torn up. Little mentions of things that had nothing to do with his parents, but were maybe related to something that they liked or enjoyed, or he associated with them would not set him off, but you could see his whole demeanor would change. And many years later, his dog died. And that man was destroyed, just completely reduced to a sobbing mess. And that was that. All those feelings he couldn't express, the death of his mother and his father, they came out with the dog. I have an uncle. It was the same thing. I mean, man, the not just like the loss of a parent, but the weird losses. And that's kind of the other thing. Like, somebody had a heart attack, or, cancer's not normal, but it is in a certain way. It's the weird losses that is kind of like where there is something else in the story that's really unsettling, especially with a personal relationship. And it can be so hard to just look in the face. And anyway, he'd had many losses like that in his life, and his dog died. And this uncle of mine as well, completely reduced to nothing, like not to nothing, but reduced to a sobbing mess of tears over the death of this dog that he hated. He proclaimed regularly to hate the dog. He did not like this dog. This was a bad dog. And the dog died, and he was just destroyed. This dog loved him. No matter how much he said that he hated the dog, he did not like the dog, he wasn't physically abusive to the dog, and I don't think it's possible to emotionally abuse a dog. So he was fine with the dog, but he claimed to hate the dog, and when the dog died, at the age of like 13 or whatever, this is an ancient dog, he was just destroyed. But that's mourning. Sometimes if we don't feel it in the moment, it comes back to, not to bite us in the ass, but it slaps us on the back of the head when we're not expecting it, if we don't feel it and recognize it. Which is important to do. It's really important to do, especially for the people in our lives. I think that it's fair to mourn an animal, especially if you haven't been able to grieve for the people you've lost in the past. But it's even more important to fully accept a loss when it happens, and recognize it and mark it, and to have people with you, and to learn to be around people when you've lost someone. It could be terrible. I mean, there's the classic, so much comedy has mined this field of the funeral or the shiva or some other, collective mourning, where people come up and just say the most inane or boring things to the mourners. And it's easy to kind of feel uncomfortable going up and talking to mourners because of that. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to be inappropriate. But I don't know. I think if you give it a little bit of thought, and that thought should probably be focused on what would I want to hear if I were them, as opposed to what will make me look good. It's hard. That's a fine line. Or a simple thing, this was something that touched me about the person that you lost, or something positive about the mourner. You are a strong person, and I respect so much your ability to be here for all of us. Because, man, that's a lot of work being a mourner. Like, truly, to truly be somebody, immediate family, spouse, brother, sister, parent, child, best friend, I think also falls in there too. To be that person mourning, and to deal with other people's mourning. When I was in high school, there was a girl in the grade above me, and she had a boyfriend, and this boyfriend was her world. He was very tall and well built. They both had very bad acne. She also had a very beautiful body, everything, but she was not a beautiful face, let's say. God, what a horrible thing to say. But it's true, and you could see that she felt that. But the boyfriend really gave her a lot of confidence. And he was in the rugby team, so she joined the girls' rugby team and excelled. She was the captain. He was in the AV club, so she joined the AV club and ended up being the person who designed all the lighting for all the productions, not just the big school play, but all the productions in the school. I'm trying to think what are some other examples of that. But anyway, I remember backstage at one of the plays, she was like maybe stage managing all. She was doing something back there. And she was sitting reading wedding magazines. And this is somebody who would have been maybe 17 at the time. And I remember seeing that, and I knew that they were very, they were really boyfriend, girlfriend. They were long boyfriend, girlfriend thing happening there. But I definitely remember seeing that and being like, whoa, that's a lot of pressure. And the next year, the boyfriend left her to date a popular girl in my year, so a younger, popular girl. And of course, his ex-girlfriend was destroyed, just completely destroyed. It was really brutal to watch. Like, it was very public. And one of my friends who was a year ahead and in this girl's class was friends with her. This girl did not have a lot of friends, because she was so involved with the boyfriend. And so my friend was friends with her and was one of her closest friends, and they still weren't that close because of this boyfriend situation. And now this girl is just kind of like completely, without a rudder, I guess. Worse than that. It was wild. Anyhow, one day she comes across the boyfriend and the new girlfriend in the new girlfriend's car, because the new girlfriend also had like a sport SUV. She was really cute. She was the kind of girl who had like a favorite color, and everything was in that favorite color. So like the SUV was blue, the keychain was blue, like all kinds of little different blue things on the keychain. Anyway, whatever. So she sees them in the car, in her car together. And so this girl immediately goes to the subway station and was pacing around on the platform for about 20 minutes before jumping in front of the train. So now it's just this intense feeling. for everyone who knew her, where it's like, oh, that's how that ends. And they set up like a mourning room for the students to go and mourn. And so my friend, who had been friends with her, never went in that mourning room because it was full of the best friends of the new girlfriend, which was really interesting. I don't think that they had many reasons to mourn, and it's not the new girlfriend's fault that she died. But what a strange, like, if I was the girl who killed myself, that's not how I would have wanted that to turn out. I would have been very disappointed. Or maybe, I don't know, to see the best friends of this girl I hated all weeping and sad. Maybe that's exactly how that was supposed to happen. Her friends who were, they all had her friends who were all in this drama class together that had been together since the first year of high school. They found their own ways and spaces to deal with the loss. But it was really intense to be at this funeral where basically an entire high school was there. And this was not a small high school. This was a very, very large high school. I don't really know what happened with the boyfriend. I can imagine that, like, how do you mourn that? Like, there's no point in making sense of it. There's no sense to be made. Around that same year, there was also this is so dark. Oh, I don't need to go there. That's so sad. It's sometimes we end up mourning people we never even knew. You read about them in the news, and you are touched in a way, and the way you are touched makes you sad, makes you very, very, very sad, and sometimes it sticks with you for the rest of your life, and sometimes it causes a revolution, like we see outside now. And I hope that for everyone who is mourning right now a loss that was completely unjust, or that could have been prevented, but they were let down by the medical system, let down by the justice system, let down by the sort of basic ways our society is set up to not pay attention to each other in a loving way, that you find peace. Because mourning is always a process of moving towards peace inside ourselves and in the world. And if we can live in a state of peace, you can't really get much better than that. You can't get much better than that.
Stream of consciousness.